My dad made me pay for all my college expenses. Now he brags about buying my little sister an apartment so she doesn't have to live with roommates. I got my first job at 17, flipping burgers at a fast food joint just off the main highway in town. It wasn't glamorous, and the grease clung to my clothes like a second skin, but I wasn't picky. My parents had made it clear. If you want to go to college, you're going to have to contribute. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an ultimatum. At the time, I didn't even know if I wanted to go to college. I didn't have some big dream of being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever my parents had in mind for me. But it wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what they wanted, and what they wanted was a son they could brag about at family barbecues. So I worked. Nights, weekends, holidays, whatever shifts they gave me, I took. I managed to save enough to pay for my first semester at the local university. It wasn't Harvard or Stanford, but I figured it would be enough to keep them happy. My sister Emily was a different story. She's 4 years younger than me, the golden child. If you met her, you'd understand why my parents adored her. She's pretty, charming in that sweet but sly way, and she has this uncanny ability to make everyone think she's the victim, no matter what the situation. She's the kind of person who could crash your car and somehow convince you to apologize for letting her drive it. While I was pulling double shifts, Emily was busy complaining about her boring high school life. My parents bent over backwards to solve her problems. She didn't like her math tutor? They hired another. She wanted a new cell phone? She got the latest model. And when she started looking at colleges, they practically rolled out the red carpet. Me? I got a pat on the back and, if I was lucky, a good job, son. I didn't resent Emily at first. She was my little sister, and I wanted to protect her. But as time went on, it became clear that my parents didn't just love her, they worshipped her. I was just the invisible son, there to fill in the gaps when needed. By the time Emily graduated from high school, my resentment had begun to simmer. I was 2 years into college, juggling classes and work, barely keeping my head above water. My parents were constantly pressuring me to focus more on school, saying things like, "You're not getting any younger, and, if you don't graduate, what are you going to do with your life?" They didn't seem to care that I was paying for most of it myself. Meanwhile, Emily was preparing for college in a very different way. She'd picked a university about an hour away not because of the academics, but because she thought the campus looked cute. She wasn't worried about money, of course. My parents were footing the entire bill. But that wasn't the part that got to me. What really got me was the apartment. One day I came home after a brutal double shift, ready to collapse into bed. My parents were sitting in the kitchen with Emily, grinning from ear to ear. "We have some exciting news," my mother said, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. They'd bought Emily an apartment. Not rented, bought. "It's just a little place near campus," Dad added, as if that made it less outrageous. "You know, so she doesn't have to deal with noisy neighbors or those tiny dorms." I was stunned. I lived at home because I couldn't afford to move out. Every penny I earned went to tuition, books, and gas to get to campus. Meanwhile, they were dropping 6 figures on a cozy little pad for Emily because, what? She didn't like sharing a bathroom? Emily wasn't impressed, of course. She wrinkled her nose and said, "It's nice, I guess. But the kitchen's kind of small." I couldn't keep my mouth shut. "Are you serious? They just bought you a whole apartment, and you're complaining about the kitchen?" My mom gave me a warning look. "Don't start, Ryan. This is a big step for them. You should be happy that your sister has a good place to focus on her studies." Focus on her studies. Right. Emily had never worked a day in her life. She didn't even want to go to college. She only applied because my parents pushed her to, just like they pushed me. The difference was that Emily had the luxury of being a brat about it. I swallowed my anger and went upstairs, slamming the door behind me. I wanted to scream, to tell them how unfair it was, but what was the point? They just brushed it off like they always did. "You're overreacting, Ryan. Don't be so jealous, Ryan. Why can't you just be happy for your sister?" That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying the conversation in my head. I felt like a stranger in my own family. The apartment became the news center of attention. My parents couldn't stop talking about it, showing off pictures to relatives and neighbors like it was some kind of trophy. Emily, predictably, treated the whole thing like it was beneath her. "The walls are so bland," she whined one night. "And the couch you picked out is too hard. Can't we replace it?" I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to eat dinner after a shift that had kept me on my feet for 9 hours straight. My father nodded as if her complaints were perfectly valid. "We'll take care of it, honey," he said. "Why don't you paint the walls yourself?" I blurted out, unable to hide my frustration. "It's your apartment, right?" Emily rolled her eyes. "I don't have time for this." My mom jumped in before I could answer. "Ryan, don't be rude. She's got enough on her plate with the move and starting school. You know how stressful it is for her." "Stressful?" "Sure. Because God forbid Emily should have to deal with anything remotely inconvenient." I pushed my plate away and went upstairs without saying another word. My room was the only place I could breathe. Even though it was small and cramped, it felt more like home than the rest of the house. I'd made it my own little sanctuary over the years, with posters, books, and the cheap second-hand desk where I studied. But lately, even my room wasn't enough. The next day, I was at work when my manager pulled me aside. "You're a hard worker, Ryan," he said, "but you've been looking burnt out lately. Is everything okay?" I nodded automatically. "Yeah, just school and stuff. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Between classes, work, and my family, I was stretched so thin I barely recognized myself. I felt like I was living someone else's life, going through the motions to make everyone else happy while completely ignoring what I wanted. The problem was that I didn't even know what I wanted. I had spent so long chasing my parents' approval that I hadn't stopped to think about what would make me happy. And then there was Emily. She was the sun my parents revolved around, and I was just a shadow in the background. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, I'd never be enough. This realization hit me harder than I expected. After that, I tried to keep my head down. Work, study, sleep, repeat. I figured if I just stayed out of everyone's way, I could get through college and eventually move out. Maybe I could even find a way to start over, to live a life that wasn't dictated by my parents' expectations. But it wasn't that easy. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from work, sweaty and exhausted, to find the house in chaos. Emily was screaming, my mom was trying to calm her down, and my dad was pacing the living room with that tight-lipped look he always got when something was bothering him. "What's going on?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. Emily spun around, her face flushed with frustration. "Someone scratched my car." Her car. A brand new SUV that my parents had given her as a congratulations for getting into college. I didn't even own a car. I borrowed my mom's old sedan whenever I needed to get to campus or work. I went outside to look at the damage. Sure enough, there was a faint scratch on the side of the SUV. It wasn't deep, more of a nick than anything else, but you'd think someone had wrecked it the way Emily was acting. "This is going to cost hundreds to fix," she wailed. "Maybe next time you should park it in the garage," I said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in my voice. Emily glared at me. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "No, I'm saying it's no big deal. It's a scratch, Emily. The car still runs, doesn't it?" My mom came out then, her hands on her hips. "Ryan, don't make this worse. Your sister's upset and you're not helping." "Of course not," I muttered. "Why would I help? I'm just the guy who's working himself to death to pay for school while you two bend over backwards to make sure she's comfortable." That hit a nerve. My mom's face hardened. "Don't start that again, Ryan. We've done a lot for you." "Like what? Letting me pay for college while you bought her an apartment and a car?" "Yeah, thanks for that." My dad finally stepped outside, his voice low but firm. "Enough. That's no way to talk to your mother." I looked at them all, Emily sulking, my mom glaring, My dad acting like I was the problem, and I realized something. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, I would never be their priority. They had made their choice, and it wasn't me. After the car fight, something shifted inside of me. I stopped trying so hard. I still went to work, I still went to class, but my heart wasn't in it. I wasn't doing it for me, and I certainly wasn't doing it for them. It felt like I was stuck in this endless loop of disappointment, and I didn't see the point in beating myself up for people who didn't care. The breaking point came a few weeks later. I'd flunked a midterm in one of my core classes. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't had time to study between work and everything else. When I got home, my mother was waiting for me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious. I sat down and braced myself. "Your professor called," she began. "He said you're not doing well in his class. What's going on?" I shrugged. "I'm working full-time and taking a full course load. It's a lot. You need to make school a priority," she said, as if it were that simple. "If you don't pass your classes, you're just wasting time and money." Something inside me snapped. "Whose money am I wasting, Mom? Mine? Because I don't see you or Dad paying for my tuition." "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising. "We've supported you in other ways. Like buying Emily a car? Or an apartment? That kind of support?" My dad walked in at that moment, catching the end of the conversation. "Don't start that again, Ryan. Your sister is doing what she's supposed to be doing, focusing on school. You should take a page out of her book." I laughed bitterly. "Emily doesn't even want to go to college. She's only doing it because you're making her, and she's still getting everything handed to her on a silver platter. Meanwhile, I'm busting my ass and all I get is criticism." "Watch your tone," my father said, his voice deep and threatening. "No, you watch your tone," I shot back, standing up. "I'm done. I'm done trying to please you. I'm done killing myself to live up to expectations I never agreed to. You want me to be like Emily? Fine. Let her be your perfect child. I'm out." My mother stared at me, her eyes wide. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm dropping out," I said, the words tumbling out before I could think them through. "I'm done wasting my time and money on a degree I don't even want." The silence that followed was deafening. My dad's face turned red, and my mom looked like she was about to cry. "You're a failure," my father finally said. "You're going to regret this. Look at your sister, she does everything right. You should take a lesson from her, not act like a spoiled brat." That was it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. I left the kitchen without saying another word. My parents kept yelling after me, but I didn't care. I slammed the door to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding. I'd said it. I'd finally said it. Quitting wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, not really. I'd been thinking about it for months, but I'd never had the courage to do it. My parents' voices were always in the back of my mind, telling me I'd be a failure without a degree. But what was the point of a degree if it wasn't for me? Still, the reality of what I'd done began to sink in that night. I wasn't sure how I was going to make it, what job I'd get, where I'd live if my parents kicked me out. All I knew was that I couldn't live like this anymore. The next morning, my dad cornered me before I could leave for work. "You're not dropping out," he said firmly, like it wasn't even up for discussion. "I already have," I said, grabbing my bag. He blocked the door. "You think you can just quit and walk away? That's not how life works, Ryan. You're going to college whether you like it or not. Are you going to pay for it?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because unless you plan to start writing checks, I don't see how you're going to stop me." His face darkened. "You're being selfish. Your mother and I have done everything for you, Dash." "For me?" I interrupted. "What have you done for me, Dad? Tell me, because all I see is you bending over backwards for Emily while I'm out here working myself into the ground." "That's enough," he snapped. "Your sister." "Yeah, let me guess," I said, cutting him off again. Emily deserves it. Emily's special. Emily does everything right. I get it, Dad. I've been getting it my whole life. But I'm not going to kill myself trying to compete for scraps of your attention anymore. I could see the anger in his eyes, but I didn't care. I pushed past him and walked out the door. When I got home from work that night, I found my mother waiting for me in the living room. She looked exhausted, like she'd been crying all day. "We just want what's best for you," she said quietly. "No, you want what's best for you," I replied, sinking into the couch. "You want a son to brag about. You don't care if I'm miserable as long as I look good on paper." "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking. "Then why don't you ever listen to me? I've been trying to tell you for years that I don't want this, and you just ignore it. All you care about is what you want." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just sat there staring. After that night, things were different at home, but not in a good way. My dad stopped talking to me altogether, except for the occasional grunt or glare when we crossed paths. My mom tried to keep the peace, but her version of peace was pretending nothing had happened. And Emily? She pretended I didn't exist. At first I thought it was her way of giving me space, but then I overheard her talking to one of her friends on the phone. She called me a quitter and said I was just jealous because Mom and Dad actually care about me. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd spent years defending her, sticking up for her when she screwed up, and this was how she saw me. The tension in the house became unbearable. I'd wake up early and leave before anyone else was up, just to avoid her. After work, I'd linger in my car, sitting in the driveway for 15 or 20 minutes, psyching myself up to go inside. Every time I opened the door, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. One night, a few weeks after the big explosion, my dad finally cornered me again. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when he came in and leaned against the counter. "You can't stay here forever," he said bluntly. I froze, the butter knife in my hand hovering over the bread. "What does that mean?" "It means you're an adult, and adults don't get to mooch off their parents while they figure out their lives. If you're not in school, you need to get a real job and start paying rent. Otherwise, you need to leave." I laughed bitterly. "A real job? You mean like the one I've been working to pay for school because you refused to help me? That job? Don't play the victim," he snapped. "You're the one who decided to drop out. You think you can just do whatever you want and not face any consequences? You mean like Emily?" I shot back. "Because she's been doing this her whole life and you never said a word to her about consequences." "Emily works hard," he said, his voice rising. "No, she doesn't," I shouted. "She complains, and you fix it. She quits, and you make excuses for her. I've been the one holding it all together, and all you've ever done is tell me I'm not enough." We stood there, staring at each other, the silence between us so thick it felt suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "Fine," I said. "You want me out? I'll go." That night I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I left a note on the kitchen table, just a few lines saying I needed space and that I'd be in touch when I was ready. Then I grabbed my things and walked out the door. Walking out of the house felt surreal. I dreamed about it for years, but the reality was messier than I expected. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a clear destination. All I knew was that I couldn't go on living the way I was living. I spent the first few nights sleeping on a friend's couch. Jason, one of my coworkers at the burger joint, didn't ask many questions when I showed up with a duffel bag. He just handed me a beer and said, "Stay as long as you need to, man." That first night, as I lay on Jason's lumpy couch, I felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. I was terrified of what was to come, but for the first time I didn't feel trapped. Over the next few weeks, I began to piece my life back together. I picked up extra shifts at work and managed to save enough to rent a room in a shared house. It wasn't much, a tiny room with peeling paint and a mattress that creaked if you so much as breathed, but it was mine. Living alone came with its own challenges. Money was tight, and I had to get creative to stretch my budget. I learned how to cook basic meals, scrimp on necessities, and deal with problems without calling my parents for help. It wasn't easy, but it felt good. One day I ran into an old friend from high school, Jake. He was working as a freelance photographer and seemed really happy. When I told him about everything that had happened, he just nodded and said, "Man, sometimes you gotta burn it all down to start over." That stuck with me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life, but I started thinking about it in a way I never had before. I realized that I had spent so much time chasing my parents' approval that I hadn't stopped to figure out what I actually liked. Jake invited me to come along on one of his shoots, just for fun. I spent the afternoon helping him set up and watching him work. It wasn't glamorous, but there was something inspiring about the way he threw himself into his art. "Have you ever thought about doing something creative?" he asked as we packed up. I laughed. "Me? I've never been the artistic type." "You don't have to be artistic," he said. "You just have to find something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning." That conversation planted a seed. For the first time in a long time, I began to think about what might make me happy, not my parents, not Emily, just me. It had been months since I had left. I hadn't spoken to my parents in that time, though I'd heard from Jason that they'd been asking around, trying to find out where I was. I ignored their texts, their emails, even the voicemails my mom left, always the same tone, a mix of guilt and passive aggression. I didn't owe them anything anymore, and I was done pretending otherwise. But one night, as I sat in my tiny room scrolling through job postings, my phone lit up with my mom's name. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, as I always did. But part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. I answered. "Ryan?" Her voice was sharp, as if she was already angry. "Yeah," I said flatly. "Well, it's about time you picked up," she snapped. "We've been trying to reach you for weeks. Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" "I'm fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She sighed heavily, the kind of exaggerated sound she always made when she wanted me to feel guilty. "Your dad and I have been talking, and we think it's time for you to stop whatever it is you're doing and come home." "I'm not coming home," I said right away. "Ryan," she said, her voice firm, "this little stunt of yours has gone on long enough. You need to grow up and face reality. Life isn't about doing what you want. It's about responsibility." I laughed bitterly. "Responsibility? You mean like working full-time while trying to juggle school just to pay for a degree I didn't even want?" "Yeah, I've had my share of that. This isn't a joke," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? Your father and I are embarrassed." "Embarrassed?" I cut her off. "Embarrassed that I finally stood up for myself? Or are you just mad that you can't parade me around anymore as your perfect son?" "Don't turn this around," she said, her voice rising. "You're being selfish, Ryan. Do you know how much we've sacrificed for you? And this is how you repay us? Running away and ignoring your family? Sacrificed?" I repeated, my voice sharp now. "You bought Emily an apartment and a car because she didn't want to share a dorm or take the bus. You gave her everything she ever asked for, and you didn't even flinch. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts just to keep up, and you couldn't care less. Don't talk to me about sacrifice." There was a pause, and then my father's voice came on the line. "We didn't call to argue," he said, though his tone made it clear he was ready to fight. "We called because you need to understand that this little rebellion of yours is going to ruin your life. You're throwing it all away, Ryan. You're a disappointment." Something inside me snapped. "Yeah, well, that's fitting, isn't it? You've been telling me I'm a disappointment for years. So why don't you stop wasting your time on a loser and focus on Emily? She's the one you care about anyway." "Don't say that." My mom started, but I didn't let her finish. "I'm done," I said firmly. "Don't call me again." And then I hung up. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking, but I didn't feel sad or guilty. I felt free. I knew it wouldn't be easy to cut them off completely, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. I didn't need their approval. I didn't have to prove anything to them. I was finally living life on my terms, and that was enough.